Alrighty, guys. Welcome to episode 9 of the TLDR podcast. I've got Luke here with me, and I've got our second guest that we've ever had on the show, Rian McKay. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
All good, man. I think this has been one of my highly anticipated conversations. Obviously, your background is a lot in BJJ, but I know probably in the past, few years, 3 or 4 years, you've been getting into the crypto space and now are employed in that space as well. I see a lot about your social media offerings when it comes to banter around the crypto world and that sort of stuff and NFTs. And yeah, really curious to get stuck in. So maybe just for those listening, maybe give us a bit of a bio onto kind of your crypto background and then maybe a little bit about your BJJ as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'll probably start with the BJJ side of things just because that started about 10 years ago for me. So I started doing jiu-jitsu in 2012. So yeah, it'd be 10 years this year. And my professional sort of working career at the time was also in the fitness industry. So similar to yourself.
Yep.
And yeah, so the jiu-jitsu side of things kind of led me down a path of eventually being a co-owner of a gym with another guy named Adam. And then I sort of got into the crypto space roughly around the time I left the fitness industry, which was in 2017. And now currently subcontract to an investment company here in Perth that basically specializes in advising wholesale investors on what to do with their money, and predominantly it's investing in different crypto assets. So
describe sort of subcontracting into that? How does that sort of work?
Well, so basically I guess I subcontract as an advisor. So I have a unique skill set in terms of, dabbling in the crypto space myself. And then I understand a lot of, the things that you can and can't do from like a wholesale investor perspective. So there's a lot of laws and stuff around what you can and can't do in the finance world.
Yeah.
I probably should have mentioned as well, I did come from the fitness side of things, I went into banking and finance through my professional career. And then, so obviously I picked up a lot of skills just working in that industry that have now sort of translated into the crypto space as well. So I basically do a bunch of research on different crypto projects, and then I present that research to my boss, and then they obviously present it to the investment company's like board of directors, and they figure out whether or not they're going to invest in the particular project I've done some research on. And there's a bunch of people who do the same sort of job as me as well. So I'm not the only person who works for the company that does that sort of research and analytics types sort of stuff. So yeah.
So literally it's like the company you work for pitches investment companies. So it's not private investments and that sort of stuff.
It is private investments. So what happens is with the company that we work for, or that I work for, I should say, basically they hold an Australian financial services license. And they can go and onboard people who are considered wholesale investors. So wholesale investor, there's a bit of criteria around it, but basically you either have to be quite a wealthy individual or come under the umbrella of a company. So you have some kind of entity type structure. And then obviously, so what they predominantly try and do is obviously go in, find different investment vehicles. So, traditionally it's probably been like property or shares, stuff like that. We just offer another service where our expertise lies in finding different crypto based projects, doing a bunch of sort of due diligence and research on those, and then making a decision on whether or not it's a good thing to sort of invest in. And the people that invest in our company, they just invest in the company itself. And then it's our job to manage where we deploy that money, basically. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a fund, like an investment fund.
Exactly.
They invest in you and then you reallocate the funds kind of thing.
Yep, exactly. That's probably a better way of explaining it than the way I have.
No, that's all good. What caused you to kind of get in the crypto space, obviously coming from banking and finance?
Yeah, I was just interested in, to be honest, it's kind of funny and selfish at the same time. I wasn't interested in working until I was 65 and 70 years old.
Yeah.
And I just sort of saw like opportunities where, it's good to educate yourself and try and figure out this investment type space. And originally I actually just got into trying to figure out like the stock market and shares and stuff. And I got a bit disgruntled because the minimum investment at the time with ComSec was about $500. And so I started investing when I was 24, roughly. It's about 5 years ago. And at the time, like $500 per investment was quite a lot of money. And it just kind of turned me off that sort of, I guess, investment market. So I started looking for other ways to invest, found out about Bitcoin through a good friend of mine, and then just decided to chuck a bunch of money into that. Funnily enough, it was $500 as well.
That'd be a great friend now.
Yeah. So, I put just some money in Bitcoin at the time. I think it was around about $5,000 Australian. So Bitcoin, that's the price Bitcoin was sitting at. And that went all the way up to like $25,000. And just sheer dumb luck, I took money out kind of roughly at the top there. It wasn't exactly at the top, but it was roughly at the top. So 5x the initial investment. And from there I was hooked. I was like, okay, I got to find out how this stuff works and what it's all about. Because obviously I can see there's opportunities here, to make money and just kind of become financially free, I guess. So that was kind of the main motivator. Yeah,
it's a pretty decent motivator. What was the turnaround time for that investment?
Honestly, it wasn't very long. I think I got in towards the end of 2017. It was roughly August 2017. And then I think Bitcoin peaked at 25,000 Australian dollars, roughly. I think it might have been January, February of 2018. So not even 6 months.
Yeah, that's gnarly.
It wasn't a lot of money. So it was only $500 and I turned that into 2,500.
Yeah.
But that was kind of just the spark to go, all right, well, there's something going on here and I need to educate myself and figure out what exactly is going on so that I can continue to try and capitalize on this, new asset class and investment vehicle.
For sure.
Going down the Bitcoin kind of rabbit hole for a second.
Yeah.
For those, and maybe this is for Tom and myself as well, but Bitcoin and its use case, is this, like, in your opinion, like the future global economy, or is this just like something that you can make money on? Or it's a pretty heavy question, but I think it's important that we understand kind of where you're coming from and what your mindset is around it.
Yeah, for sure. Look, it's a good question. It probably will take me a couple of minutes to explain a little bit about Bitcoin and its history and also the history of money. So Bitcoin basically is, it's predominantly two things. I try and think about Bitcoin as in two sort of layers, I guess you could say. So the first layer is that it's an open source, decentralized, immutable monetary network. All right. So I guess when you start to unpack that, you're going like, wow, there's a lot of buzzwords there. And what are you talking about? But basically it's an open source monetary network that is free from any sort of centralized control. So there's no control mechanism that any one person or entity has over the Bitcoin network.
Mm-hmm.
It's unique in the fact that it's controlled by the people who run the network, which is, everybody who decides to invest in Bitcoin itself. When you look at what Bitcoin is, you read the Bitcoin white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, it is supposed to be some form of peer-to-peer digital electronic cash payment system. I think the debate's still out on whether or not that's exactly what its use case is now.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of other networks in the crypto space now that are better at doing that one job, but it seems to kind of be shifting more towards a fact that it's predominantly going to be a store of value, for long-term investors. I guess when you start to unpack what Bitcoin is, you first kind of really need to understand what money is. And money is predominantly two things. It's a medium of exchange, all right, and a store of value. So I guess Bitcoin is those two things, but I think it's predominantly more a store of value.
Yeah.
The second part to Bitcoin, so first part is that it's a network, it's a monetary network. Second part is there is a currency component to it. So you have Bitcoin, the network, and then you also have Bitcoin, the token itself, which is predominantly what people talk about or refer to when they are talking about Bitcoin. But it's important for me, I think, to understand like what the network is and how that sort of works. So traditionally in traditional finance, when you talk about central banking and the banking sort of system, most banks used to use, or sorry, still use a centralized ledger-based system, meaning that the bank themselves holds the ownership over the ledger, and the ledger itself is just a recording of all the transactions that have happened usually throughout the day. And then they upload that to a centralized database usually controlled by a central bank, depending on how that particular country has structured its financial system. Where Bitcoin differs is it also uses obviously a ledger system, but the the ledger system itself through the Bitcoin network is completely decentralized, meaning that it's uploaded to the internet roughly every 10 minutes, and every participant in the Bitcoin network has access to it. So it's not like shrouded in secrecy or hidden behind some kind of central database like it would be if a bank was controlling it.
Yep.
Every single person who has access to the internet and has access to a Bitcoin wallet has also got access to looking at the Bitcoin ledger itself, which I think is quite important. So that obviously differs quite a lot from the traditional legacy finance system, where I couldn't, for example, go and ask and request information from whatever bank you bank with, Tom, or yourself, Luke. But on the Bitcoin network, I can see every transaction that's taken place ever.
So what's the benefit of that?
Well, what it means is basically no central authority has control over the monetary network itself. So when you have a traditional finance system, the central bank usually controls the flow of money, and they have a bunch of different things in place that we refer to as policies. So monetary policies that allow them to control the flow of money, which basically just means how much money they're printing and how much money they're lending out to other banks at the time. Bitcoin is unique in the fact that it has a limited supply of 21 million Bitcoin. So what's been written into the Bitcoin code itself is the fact that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Those Bitcoin will eventually be mined by, I think it's roughly predicted to be the year of 2140 is roughly the year.
Yeah,
so
wow.
Quite a while away, about 120 years away from now, from this recording. What happens when
we're not storing this. This will go live soon. Yeah, don't worry.
Yeah. What happens when you inflate a currency is it starts to become devalued, which happens quite often. There's obviously a number of examples. You can look at, Venezuela as an example. You can look at Argentina as also an example. There's a bunch of different examples throughout human history where you can see, different central banks and governments that control the supply of money have inflated the currency to it essentially becoming just worthless. It ends up not being worth anything at all. And so when you want to save money or save for the future, you basically foregoing something now. So for example, I've decided instead of spending $50, I've decided to save $50, and I want that $50 to still be worth $50 sometime in the future. What happens is when the currency itself gets inflated, that $50 becomes worth less in the sense that you can buy less things with that $50.
Yeah.
So with the Bitcoin network, it's supposed to appreciate in value over time and not depreciate like a traditional currency does.
Yeah, well, that's super simple, and that would be handy, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be. I think the main thing that goes into that as well is the control of the money supply. So when you have humans controlling a money supply, typically they will kind of do what's in the best interest for themselves at that particular point in time.
Yeah.
And they won't really care too much about the repercussions of their actions within the future. So you in finance, you hear this term a lot. We call it kicking the can down the road. Basically, people who are in power now that decide that there's a problem now with with COVID, for example, we have to print a bunch of money so that the economy can continue to obviously like cycle and create value.
Mm-hmm.
So we print a bunch of money now so that the economy now still continues to obviously power itself, and people don't lose jobs and money still flows around within that economy. But in 5 years' time, there's so much money in the system that eventually there's going to be an issue with the devaluation of that currency. And also that money's come from somewhere. We borrowed it from somewhere, typically a central bank. So we have to eventually pay that back. So future generations will be paying that debt back by the Australian people or the American people or wherever you're kind of living for a long time, which is obviously problematic. That increases things like taxes. You see that your money that you're earning on a weekly basis just goes less. Like doesn't go as far as it currently does, so you buy less and less with it.
Yeah.
So those sort of things are problematic. Whereas Bitcoin obviously has a limited supply, which is programmed into the Bitcoin network. Therefore, hopefully, it negates that issue that we have with the oversupply of money.
So
Hopefully
being only 21 million in supply, yeah, that was a great.
Sorry if that was a long-winded answer.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's a lot to take in because it is such a new thing, at least for me, and maybe for you as well, Tom. You've been dealing with it for years now, but I own some cryptocurrency and I own a little bit of Bitcoin, like not even close to a whole Bitcoin or anything like that. But my main concern, I guess, is, well, obviously like hacks is a pretty big issue. And there was one just recently, I guess, like maybe 6 months ago or something like that. And that causes a little bit of turmoil, I suppose, within the market, or news coming out, like Russia saying that they're going to have some kind of like legislation or policy around it, or not even take it on at all. And China, the same thing. And I think it was Evergrande, one of the like Chinese multi-billion-dollar companies, huge company, went bankrupt essentially, and that like caused a massive dip in the market. I'm assuming the stock market has the same kind of thing where it dips and flows relative to what's happening in the real world. It just seems like how volatile crypto is as a whole, that's what would turn a lot of people off, I suppose. I mean, even if we look at the last maybe 6 months or so, there's
great.
Like, I don't know what yours is like. Mine's like 50% down or something, like a pretty massive dip. Do you see this as like the bear market, or is this just part of it? Like you should scroll out, you should look at the big macro and see exactly where we're at in this massive chart over the last 5 years or even 12 months. And we're way up in comparison to where we were.
Yeah, I am more of a macro level investor. I tried my hand at day trading for a while and just didn't enjoy it. And I wasn't very successful. I didn't lose a lot of money, but I didn't enjoy it enough to try and learn too much about, how to day trade and what have you. So yeah, I have a long-term sort of macro level investment, strategy. Like you've just kind of said, that typical zoom out type mentality. So more of a, holding for the long term. I think Bitcoin and the crypto market is obviously, quite volatile. It's volatile for probably one predominant reason where basically the market cap is so small. It's currently less than 2 trillion. It's kind of gone and fluctuated a little bit above that $2 trillion mark over the last, say, 18 months. But it's so small that any sort of, major, monetary withdrawal, people taking money from Bitcoin, converting it to, a US dollar currency, or taking it out of the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency network altogether, can cause a major price fluctuation. And that's kind of what you see happening now. There's not enough money in the system for, people, when they decide to take money out, it causes kind of like a relatively big swing in price. So comparative to other traditional assets where, say, the stock market, for example, if the stock market went down like 3, 4, 5% in one day, that would be considered a huge financial loss in the traditional finance world. In the Bitcoin space, you can see 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50% drops or rises within the same period of time. So for example, Elon Musk tweeted about Bitcoin and allowing Tesla to accept Bitcoin for purchases of their vehicles. At some point, I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it was March 2020 or 2021. The timeline sort of eludes me, but
21, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, Bitcoin went up in value about $10,000 US in that single day. And then obviously the same sort of thing happens when negative news cycles come out about Bitcoin. Although in saying that, the price when it did peak at about 69,000 US, about sort of roughly 6 months ago, it has been on a steady decline since then. So yeah, the price is quite volatile at the moment. When the market cap increases past that $2 million mark, so if you equate it to the market cap of gold, let's say, which I think sits at around about 10 trillion, you should see a less volatile asset than we currently have.
Yeah. So forgive me if I got this wrong, but market cap is price times quantity. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So that was going to be kind of my next question. Like you said, the 2 trillion on Bitcoin. So what is like a less volatile number? But that's a good example of gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Gold. And then I guess you can look at different asset classes. Property is probably another good one. And then you can look at subcategories within that. So say I think the property value of certain parts of California is like, in the hundreds of trillions. So stuff like that, once the Bitcoin market cap itself starts to get more and more money into it, I think roughly about that $10 trillion mark, you'll see a much less volatile asset and the price itself will kind of stabilize. And the crypto sort of space sort of seems to go in cycles. So like we talk about these four-year sort of cycles where they sort of coincide with the Bitcoin halving. So I guess it's probably valuable to explain what that is as well. So every 4 years roughly, or it's 210,000 blocks, which is roughly every 4 years, the mining rewards for Bitcoin itself halves. So it was, in the beginning, it was 50 Bitcoin per block that was added to the blockchain. So the people mining obviously Bitcoin back in the day were earning quite a bit of Bitcoin. That's halved. I think it's 12.5 Bitcoin per block reward now. So that halves, and that plays a big factor in basically the cycle of the Bitcoin market as well. So roughly 18 months past the last halving was kind of roughly when we went to that sort of $69,000 US sort of price high. And then the next 24 months after that, just looking back on the last sort of 3 halving cycles we've had, but roughly that 24-month period ends up sort of being a bear market. So the price doesn't move past that all-time high that it did in that 18-month period. It drops off significantly by about 50% roughly, sometimes more. And then kind of trends sideways for quite a period of time. So the bear market itself sort of ends up being relatively, boring. There isn't huge price fluctuations. The overall like macro price chart, I guess, sort of trends sideways. And then after that other 4 year sort of time period comes around, next halving happens. And then throughout that 18 months post halving, we kind of have a steady uptrend with obviously a couple of, volatile price rises as well. So
what part of that, what stage of that are we in at the moment?
We are, I think we've already, so the 18-month timeline was, roughly that $69,000 peak that we had, which was about 6 months ago. So we're kind of in the first 6 months of the 24-month, I guess, bear cycle, you could say.
So then after that 24 months, so say in 18 more months, right? It'll halve again, or it'll okay. So
roughly 18 months. So it's it's done by blocks, so via the blockchain itself. But that's roughly every 4 years, which from now would be you're right, 18 months time.
So the mining of that would speed up as more people will get on board and develop the software, I suppose, to mine stuff. Maybe we should talk about that actually. How someone could go about actually mining this thing. Yeah,
for sure. I'm not an expert on Bitcoin mining itself, but I obviously understand how it works roughly. So in a nutshell, I guess Bitcoin miners, people who mine Bitcoin, are entrusted with upholding the integrity of the Bitcoin network. So basically what happens is in order to accomplish that, you have to have a bunch of people who run what we call a mining node. It's basically just like a relatively powerful computer. It used to just be, you could do it using one or two computers. Now it's become like quite a lucrative operation, and people are running thousands and thousands of computers at a time just to mine Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But basically they're entrusted with upholding the integrity of the network. And what that sort of means is whenever you have a transaction that's performed on the Bitcoin network, it has to be validated by these people that we refer to as miners. And it's not just one miner that has to agree that that transaction has taken place. The transaction itself is usually approved by a bunch of different miners. So they all have to be in agreement that, say, for example, Tom, you've sent me $10 worth of Bitcoin. There has to be a number of different miners that also agree that that transaction has happened. Otherwise, you come into a problem of what we call the double spending problem, where, say, for example, because the network is pseudo-anonymous, Tom, you could say that you have $10 and you want to give me $10 for some kind of good or service, and you also want to give that same $10 to Luke for whatever good or service. So you kind of run into a problem of being potentially just having $10 and paying two people with that same $10 bill. So Bitcoin miners are entrusted to go, okay, Tom, well, you actually paid Ryan that $10 first.
Yeah.
Therefore, that transaction is the transaction we're going to process. The secondary transaction that you tried to pay to Luke, that doesn't exist anymore. We're actually not going to approve that transaction. The $10 has gone to Ryan. So Bitcoin miners, in a nutshell, they basically approve transactions and add those transactions to the Bitcoin blockchain on a roughly, say, every 10-minute basis. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter, depending on the congestion of the network. It's sort of roughly every 10 minutes. And then for that process, they get paid in Bitcoin. So that halving cycle we were sort of just talking about a minute ago.
Yeah.
If you're the miner that ends up being the one, the last miner that approves that transaction within that little chain or that process, you end up collecting that mining reward, which I think is roughly at the moment 12.5 Bitcoins per mining reward.
It's pretty handy, like how to approve transactions. That's not a bad little hourly rate, surely.
No, it's not, but it's a complex process. It requires a lot of computing power.
Yeah, okay.
And the setups nowadays are, quite extensive. You see, I don't know if you've ever seen any documentaries on it, but there's entire buildings and stuff. Or actually previously, before China decided to kick all the miners out of China, there was entire just like buildings that had literally just computer. I think it's called a GPU or something like that, which is just like the shell of a computer, basically performing all these equations to like approve and disprove transactions on the Bitcoin network. And yeah, like entire buildings worth of computers. Just dedicated towards that one task. Sometimes as well, you could run a bunch of mining nodes and you could have a pretty big setup like that, and your computer itself might not end up getting the mining reward. So you're obviously expending quite a bit of money in power, like paying for power.
Yeah.
And then you might
That's
might also
rough.
miss out. It is rough, yeah. So
don't get paid for your work.
No, that's right. Yeah.
So we've kind of delved into like Bitcoin.
The environmental impact.
Oh,
sorry.
There you go.
What's the environmental impact of this?
Well, look, yeah. So obviously the mining process is quite power extensive. I guess you have to figure out and make the correct comparison. So in comparison to, say, a small country, which is roughly what the power supply of sort of running the Bitcoin network equates to. When you think about it on that sort of a scale, it's like, oh, okay, wow, like this is quite impactful, and the carbon footprint this leaves on the planet is quite bad. But then I guess when you take into account like huge countries like, say, the US, for example, or China or what have you, and running their current existing financial infrastructures that they have, what are the impacts that they currently have on the environment, just running their traditional financial sort of, systems. So
Yeah.
it's all really comparative, in my opinion. Yes, it does obviously require a lot of power to run the network. But then when you compare it to, you know, like I was saying, the traditional financial system, it doesn't really, it doesn't really add up. It's quite a bit smaller than I guess running the, you know, current system that we have.
Yeah, for sure.
It seems like there's a lot of stigma around any new system that comes out or any new version of something, like kind of going down the route of power, like nuclear power. It seems to be something that was talked about maybe five or 8 years ago or something in SA, where we were looking to bury it. Essentially, it's like a way of getting rid of it, and people are up in arms about it and like how bad that's going to be for the environment and whatnot. But if you look at nuclear power itself, it's actually like the cleanest form. But I think that word nuclear is just like got this really bad name for itself after obviously like Chernobyl and whatnot. So do you think that this is the same kind of thing? We haven't seen mass adoption with nuclear power yet. Do you feel like maybe this is going to be the same kind of thing? People are looking at the environmental impact of Bitcoin, and I mean, we've got you saying that it's comparable, and I know no better, but people, I think, and maybe the media is just like kind of so tied up with central banking systems that whatever the media says kind of goes. Do you see like some comparison between the two?
Yeah, it's probably a pretty good comparison, to be fair as well. I think anytime you have some form of like disruptive technology coming into place, you know, you do sort of see people who are currently, you know, in power or who have a vested interest in running the current system. You know, they decide that, okay, this isn't good. This is going to really throw out what we're currently doing. And they obviously, you know, try and sort of shun it or discredit it or what have you. The same sort of thing happened with the internet when the internet came around in the, you know, early to mid 90s. A lot of people were like, oh, this is never going to work. This is silly. No one's ever going to buy anything online. People aren't going to interact online. Like I couldn't imagine a world without the internet, right? Obviously we've grown up, you know, we've grown up in a slightly different era to our parents. But the same sort of thing was said then about the internet, and obviously look at the impact that's had on the world now. So yeah, I think eventually people will realize, okay, there's, you know, better ways to do things that we have been doing for years. As an example, the SWIFT payment system, which is an international payment system that a lot of countries use to transfer money from, you know, one country to another. It's been around for like 70 or 80 years. Like that's insane. It's a long time. Like technology and innovation throughout that 70 to 80 years has been massive. Like the internet wasn't around back then, obviously, when this was invented. I think they were still using like, you know, telegrams and Morse codes and stuff 70 or 80 years ago.
True.
Right. So
yeah,
like, yeah, I think things and people just kind of need to get with the times, accept that these things are, you know, coming. And the only kind of way to, you know, understand it is, you know, get on board, educate yourself about it, and yeah, try and jump on board any way you kind of can, I guess.
Good time to buy now to get
That's
involved.
it. Good time to buy the dip, they say.
That's right.
Where would you say educate yourself and that sort of stuff? How does one educate themselves? Obviously, YouTube's a massive platform for education these days, and that's where, you know, pretty much got my degree. What are the you are what you subscribe to, and I'm a big believer in that. So the more you look for positivity in crypto, you're going to find it. The more you look for negativity in crypto, you'll find it. So what are some potential good resources, or where would you go to actually get an understanding before someone just goes, fuck it, I'll just send, you know, I'll just switch off from, you know, a savings account, which I'm a big, personally don't believe in savings accounts. I think they just, you know, like you say, inflation kills them. How would one educate themselves to do that?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I would strongly recommend people go and read the Bitcoin white paper to begin with, just as the very, very foundational piece of your educational journey in the crypto space.
Yeah.
It'll probably, it's a 10 to 15 page document. It's not very long. So you'll sort of get an understanding of, you know, what Bitcoin is, or I guess what Bitcoin was sort of supposed to be. And then from there, you can start to build out your knowledge base. So in the crypto space, it's quite difficult because there's a monetary or financial incentive for YouTubers to push certain, you know, projects and stuff onto their followers. it's quite a convoluted area where you have to have a good filter on what's a good source and what's not a good source.
Yeah.
The sources I tend to sort of lean towards are ones that have a traditional finance sort of background. So these are people that have come from the traditional finance space. They understand markets, you know, from various angles. Mostly they have like a macro sort of perspective on markets, and they can kind of analyze the crypto market, Bitcoin, Ethereum, a bunch of the top sort of different cryptocurrencies. So the sources I like are, I'll just name a couple, but Real Vision Finance, run by a guy named Raoul Powell. He has a extensive traditional finance background. He's run a bunch of really, really big investment funds and companies and stuff throughout the US. I think he's been based in Singapore as well, and also the UK.
Yeah.
He puts out some really good content. It's probably not as engaging as like a fun to listen to podcast, kind of like, I guess, you know, Joe Rogan or something like that, but it's quite educational.
Is that a podcast or a YouTube or?
He has both. Yeah. So he puts the content out across like a podcast format as well as on YouTube.
Sick.
So yeah, Real Vision Finance, probably the predominant one I listen to. And then there's a bunch of decent guys within the space as well. So a guy named Anthony Pompliano has a similar sort of financial, I guess, traditional financial background. He puts out some really good content. So they're probably the two main ones I would recommend people to go and listen to. There's a lot out. Yeah, there's a lot out there. So.
No, you're right. Well, neither of those are the ones that I've heard of. So I was looking in the wrong area. We'll find them and link them for sure. And we'll get that white paper and link that through. A lot of the conversation's been around Bitcoin itself instead of maybe crypto. Like you just mentioned there's like Ethereum and there's heaps of altcoins and that sort of stuff. And they're constantly coming out with new ones. Almost, I feel like every day or every week there's a new coin. Obviously it's like, not obvious, but there's so many national currencies, right? But the US dollar is the indicator of a lot of, you know, currencies. Like what is everything compared to the US dollar? I read it into Bitcoin as like that sort of indicator. It's like, it's the main one that dictates what others will do, I guess. Is that correct? And then what's the purpose of so many of these? Like, you know, Ethereum has been the number 2 for so long. How is it number 2? What's the purpose of those ones and that sort of stuff? I guess they all have their own white paper maybe, or?
Yeah, exactly. So I would probably compare Bitcoin more to gold rather than, you know, a currency. So it's becoming quite obvious to people within the community, within the crypto space, that Bitcoin is more like a store of value. And the, you know, traditional store of value within the traditional financial world has predominantly been gold. So we sort of compare it to gold. Ethereum and most of these other altcoins, like you've said, differ a little bit. Ethereum differs in the fact that it has this smart contract capability. So not only is Ethereum itself, you know, a monetary network, it also allows users to build things on top of that network itself as well. So for example, we now have this NFT craze that we're sort of going through, that we've kind of been going through for maybe the last 12 months or so. An NFT can be built on a bunch of different networks, but a lot of them are deciding to build on top of the Ethereum network through this smart contract capability. So I guess that's probably how I would, you know, say that Bitcoin differs from a lot of these other particular altcoins, is the fact that Bitcoin's really quite simple. It's just an open source monetary network that you can sort of, you know, trade value on top of, and predominantly store value through. Whereas Ethereum functions in a slightly different way, where you can build stuff on top of it, add stuff to the network itself. Obviously, if you understand how to code and build things like that. And it has this smart contract capability where you can, you know, build different things on top of it, like NFTs. We're seeing, you know, the space go through a huge craze probably over the last, say, 12 months with this NFT smart contract sort of, like entering the space, I guess. Although NFTs have been around for a little while, they haven't taken off until about 12 months ago. So they're sort of how they mainly differ. There's also mechanisms of control of the money supply as well. So for example, Ethereum doesn't have a capped monetary supply. It sort of scales depending on how many users are like using the network itself.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously Bitcoin's limited to that 21 million supply. And then obviously you have a bunch of different other altcoins that do similar stuff where, you know, the token itself or the coin itself, the currency, which is probably a little bit of a misnomer, but it basically, you know, the tokens within those networks, you know, power the network. So you get rewarded in the Ethereum token, for example, if you're an Ethereum miner and stuff like that. So did you want to talk about NFTs as well? Is that maybe an interesting topic?
Yeah, bro, for sure. Like, I think that's been the buzzword. Like I say, you are what you subscribe to, so I'm not sure if everyone else has been seeing it, but people have just been buying monkeys and shit. And I'm just like, what's going on? How, like, I want to understand it, but I still really don't. How can literally an image, and I get the whole, like, I can screenshot this and now it's mine. And it's like, yeah, but you don't actually have the original, and you can have a photo of Mona Lisa, but you don't have the Mona Lisa, and all that sort of stuff. And from what I see, a lot of people are buying them to resell them. Not like, you know, you would have the Mona Lisa to display it, to show it off and things like that in terms of art. Like, I've got art, I've bought it to display it. I'm not buying it going, cool, I'm really hanging out for someone to walk into my house and buy this off me for a greater price, sort of thing. I saw someone buy, I can't remember where it was, but he bought an NFT and it was like, this kind of looks like Grimes. So I'm really hoping like Elon's wife sees it and she wants it, and then I can sell it to her. So yeah, obviously non-fungible token, is that right? And then yeah, explain how a screenshotted image or whatever it is. Yeah, take us down that journey.
All right, so yeah, NFT, the acronym stands for non-fungible token. To understand a non-fungible token, I think it's important to understand the word fungibility or fungible. So something that has the probability of being fungible means that it can, fungibility itself means that it can be easily interchangeable or swapped for something that's identical into of itself. So for example, money is fungible. A $5 note can easily be interchanged for another $5 note, or $2 coins and a $1 coin. It's very easily interchangeable within itself. Something that's non-fungible is meant to be unique in the fact that it's like a one of one of something. So there's only ever kind of been one thing, I guess, printed, or in the terms of art NFTs, there's only ever one piece of art that has been produced into an NFT that is that exact NFT itself. Yeah. So I guess, yeah, to try and understand what an NFT is and how that differs from something that is fungible, it's important to understand fungibility. NFTs are a bit of a rabbit hole. When you talk about NFTs, most people just think of like the art sort of aspect, like you've kind of described, which is probably important to understand, but I think it's probably the simplest use case for the technology itself. But basically, how I like to think of it is almost like a trading card. So back in the day, Pokemon cards or Yu-Gi-Oh cards and stuff like that were really quite popular.
Yeah, love me some Yu-Gi-Oh.
Yeah, I was a big Pokemon Yu-Gi-Oh fan as well. But essentially, a piece of NFT art is, I guess, kind of similar to a trading card. How it differs from something in the real world is when I own the NFT, I own the IP rights to the NFT. So if I actually own, say, the Mona Lisa that's been produced on the Ethereum network, regardless of whether or not you screenshot that, I still own the IP rights to that piece of artwork. That benefits both parties. So it benefits the artist who originally created the artwork. It also benefits me because now I own an asset that's obviously scarce, right? It benefits the artist in one sort of main way, where I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with how the art space currently works, but basically an artist can go and paint something or create something, let's say a painting, for example, for $200, and they sell it to somebody else for that amount of money. And that's it. That's all the financial benefit they ever see from that one piece of art, you know, that might have taken them 10, 15, 20, 30 hours to produce. That person who's bought the piece of art now goes on to sell that artwork in a gallery, say in New York City, for $25,000. So they've made a huge gain by buying something for $200 and then flipping it again for $25,000. And the artist who originally created the artwork, that poured all those hours into making that art piece, only ever sees that $200, and they have to go and reproduce something else, make some kind of other piece of art.
Yep.
Where the NFT technology differs in that space, it kind of changes the fact that the artist doesn't get paid anymore after the fact that they've originally sold that piece of art. So if I have an NFT and I've created, a bunch of different art, and I go and sell them on, say, an NFT platform. So the most popular one is, it's referred to as OpenSea, or it's called OpenSea.
Mm-hmm.
If I go and sell that piece of art on OpenSea, within inside that smart contract, so that NFT smart contract, I can basically say that anytime that this piece of art is resold, I take a commission, and that commission is 10% of whatever price that piece of art sells for. So the artist will forever, I guess, retain or earn a financial sort of incentive every time that piece of art is flipped. So that sort of helps, I guess, artists that have that issue. So I recently recorded a podcast with a group of people who are doing an NFT project here in Australia for Indigenous Australian artists. Basically, they have that exact problem I described. So they would go and paint, an Indigenous artist will go and paint something which takes them obviously hours to produce. They paint it, someone comes over, buys it for $200, whacks it in a gallery in New York City, sells it for $25,000, and that obviously artist gets nothing. So the NFT smart contract itself comes along and helps out the artist in the fact that they will continually earn a financial benefit every time that piece of art is sold. But also NFTs can be used for a range of different uses, I guess. So the one that I'm predominantly positioned in, and the one that I spend a lot of my time on, is the gaming space. So gamers have a similar problem to what I just described as the artists, but they spend a lot of time playing games and using like real money to buy things within inside that game economy. So for example, Fortnite is probably one of the most popular games ever to be played, right? It's still quite popular now. Kids will go and spend real money to buy things within the Fortnite game. So they buy things like weapons and skins and stuff like that. They never actually retain ownership over any of those things that they buy. So they're spending real money to essentially be able to use something within inside that game, but they never actually retain ownership over the thing that they've just bought. An NFT can also be used in that gaming aspect where, say, for example, the game is built on the Ethereum network. I can then go and buy the NFT associated with that game. Say, for example, it's like a fighting game. I can buy that NFT. I can then also customize that character. So I can go and buy, skins, armor, weapons, etc. And then I retain ownership over those things. So I've spent real money, but I've also actually obtained the IP rights to those things that I've just bought in that digital setting. In the gaming space, obviously that doesn't happen, right? So, in Fortnite, you could get your account cancelled by the game's creators, and you might have spent $2,000 or $3,000 building up your character within that that particular game, and you can't do anything about it because you never end up obviously owning the game itself, or sorry, owning the avatar or any of the stuff that you purchased. Whereas obviously if I have an NFT based game built out like I've just described on the Ethereum network, and I obviously spend money, I can then get the NFT itself, which is obviously predominantly probably going to be the avatar of whatever game I'm playing, plus whatever add-ons I decide to buy, and I retain the ownership over those assets. And then it gets even more complex where there are games out there that are being created. So this play-to-earn gaming space on various different networks, but I'll continue to just use Ethereum to keep things simple. They're being built on top of Ethereum. And I can basically buy NFTs that are in this game setting, I guess. And I can use the NFT within that gaming environment to earn a yield. So I can go and accomplish tasks within that game that have been obviously designed by the game creator. And by doing well within inside that game, I can earn an in-game token or in-game currency, can then exchange that in-game currency for say Ethereum or for even real money, and I can start to use that money that I've created or made, I should say, in the real world to buy real things as well. So like paying rents, paying my mortgage, all that sort of stuff. So that sort of stuff's happening right now. People, a really popular game in the crypto space called Axie Infinity came about roughly when COVID started to hit here, which was March 2020.
Yeah.
And people in Indonesia who obviously live in a pretty rough environment, they were hammered by COVID quite badly. And this game came about where basically you buy a bunch of avatars within the game, and then like I was saying, you go and accomplish different tasks, and you earn this in-game token or in-game currency. And then you can go on to obviously accumulate as much of that as you want, and then try and cash it out into real dollars. And people in Indonesia were doing exactly that throughout COVID when they'd obviously lost their jobs. They had no, the government didn't help anybody over there. They didn't have the same luxuries we do. And people were earning like really good money. I read some articles where a couple of people in Indonesia were playing this game, Axie Infinity, and earning roughly $1 million per year.
Jeez.
Just playing a game, yeah. So
like that was a really detailed description. It's quite tangible. You can kind of visualize a lot of that. So that was helpful for sure. A couple of questions going back. Definitely get us the name of that Indigenous Art podcast, because that's super curious. I'm intrigued by that. That's definitely I'll have a listen, and I'm sure there'll be others that want to listen. When it comes to like owning the IP, as an example, like in, I want to say the real world, not the gaming space. Say you have IP, right, and someone goes and that comes with legal ramifications should someone take that IP. So as an example, let's use the Mona Lisa case. Like, cool, I own the rights to the NFT that is the Mona Lisa. Someone screenshots it and puts it somewhere. Is it then well within my rights legally to sue in a real court? Sorry, not real, you know what I mean? That someone use that, hey, that's my IP, you can't use that. Like, how does that work?
At the moment, no. There's no the legislation around crypto is quite convoluted, and it's probably lacking in a lot of areas. So there's not a lot of legislation and regulation around the space.
Yeah.
But what happens is when you decide to screenshot something and upload it to a network, people can see whose piece of art was created first. And usually as well, if they're a well-known artist, their account that they use to produce art and sell art will be verified by a bunch of trusted parties within the network. So for example, the Ethereum network, like I was saying, uses a platform called OpenSea, which is just like a big kind of like an eBay, where you can basically upload stuff and buy and sell things on top of. And OpenSea themselves will, verify certain artists or what have you. So if I was to just go and screenshot something that's already been produced on the Ethereum network, as an example, like maybe a Bored Ape, which is quite a popular thing at the moment.
Yeah.
People will see, okay, that's a fake. It's not actually been produced by, the Bored Ape Yacht Club themselves. You can tell that the wallet address that it's been produced from isn't the original Bored Ape wallet address that produced all the other Bored Apes.
Yeah.
So it's not a real piece of art or what have you. You're just buying a fake, really.
So basically discredit you a little bit as well, like absolutely. As a user. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, gnarly.
So do you feel that, given that you need verification to be able to, well, you don't need verification to produce stuff, but in order to be a trusted source, do you feel like that maybe like bottlenecks a little bit of the potential for people to like create and actually make money from their art? Because it seems like with this mass adoption, it seems like there's this massive flood of people going to this OpenSea website, and there's a lot of stuff on there for all different, ranges of prices, from like 0.001 of an Ethereum all the way up to like 1,000 Ethereum or whatever. It feels like there's a bit of a bottleneck. But then as I'm kind of saying that, I guess that's what art is like in the real world anyway. It's like you've got Beeple is a good example of that. I'm sure you've heard of Beeple, who he has every single day for 14 years or something has created some kind of piece of art. And look him up on Instagram. It's amazing if you haven't seen it before. But then when these NFTs came about, he started putting them on this OpenSea. And then I can't remember the exact amount, but I want to say it's like $500 million or some like
It was
unreal amount of money, basically in a couple of years. But it took him that long to get to that point of being able to produce stuff. And then he was verified because people knew who he was, because he had been doing it for this long time. Do you feel like there is some kind of bottleneck with how successful you can be in that kind of place? Because there is so many people kind of streaming to this place, this open sea.
Yeah, I think that in terms of the art space, I think it's quite convoluted now. Like there's a lot of people trying to produce art-based NFTs. They've obviously seen the probably the financial gain is probably what most people have seen and gone, oh, okay, I can replicate that. I understand how that's been produced and I think I can replicate that. I think where people kind of maybe don't understand is that obviously, like you've just said, people produced art for, I think it was about 14 years before he sort of saw any significant, monetary gain. And he sold one piece of art for $69 million. But it took him 14 years to do that, right? So he'd built up a reputation over such a long period of time that, once this NFT technology came out and he decided to use it to produce the piece of art that he did, the Everydays piece of art, I think it was called, he obviously had a bunch of value behind that because people knew who he was. He'd built a reputation over such a long period of time. I think where people are going wrong now and probably getting stuck now is that they think they can replicate the same thing using NFT technology, but in such a short period of time. Whereas, like, say, for example, if I decided to try and do something similar to Beeple and I was like, oh yeah, I'm the next Beeple, I'm Beeple number 2 or whatever, people are just going to, say, well, no, you're not. You haven't produced anything. Maybe you've done, this Everydays thing for 3 months. Doesn't really compare to 14 years, right? I think the OpenSea space itself is very convoluted. I like to, when I look at NFTs, like I was saying before, I'm predominantly in the gaming space. So I like to look at NFTs that have some form of utility behind them. When I say utility, I mean they have the ability to go and produce a yield on top of them. So in the gaming sort of space, we look at different games that we think might be popular. And then how can we use those NFTs inside that gaming environment to produce a yield? So how do we like earn an income from playing that game? Or how do we earn an income from deploying that asset within that game through maybe a trusted party? Maybe we hire someone to play the game for us using the NFTs that we bought. And then how do we obviously earn money off the back of that as well? So they're the kind of things I guess I look at. I think you're right in terms of a bottleneck. I think probably majority of the NFT projects that are out there now, probably somewhere in the realm of 90 to 95% of projects in a couple of years will probably be worth nothing. And you'll have a bunch of projects that either have utility or they have like big, powerful communities behind them. So, like for example, Bored Ape Yacht Club is quite a popular one. You have a bunch of celebrities going on and buying those sorts of things. I can't see the value of those diminishing anytime soon. You have Beeple's artwork, obviously, being very, very popular. So I think a lot of these things, these art projects are very community driven and based on, popularity. And then obviously you have a different side of or different aspect to the NFT space where, gaming is just sort of one use case that sort of sticks out to me because it has utility and I can see that there's going to be value in using those NFTs in that in-game economy to produce a yield.
Yeah, like with like kind of a twofold thought. Like with the art, then I'm so curious about it. Do you think people go like to Officeworks, print it off, and go, "Cool, I want that in my home"? Otherwise, you've got to have, like you've got to have your computer open to, or like buy a TV to just put it on the TV, put it on the wall. I don't know. Like I just quickly had a quick look at some of people's art, and it looks elite, but I don't want to have his Instagram up all the time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you seen that thing that he gifted Joe Rogan when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast?
No. What was that?
So he gifted him an NFT, but it's displayed in like a...
Oh, the Elon Musk thing?
Yes, the Elon Musk thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not sure how it's displayed. It's like in a digital frame, I guess you could call it. Like it looks like a frame.
Yeah.
Like a traditional art frame, but it's displayed
a digital image.
Digitally. Yeah. So I don't know what people do.
Is digital.
Yeah.
Why not? It makes complete sense.
Like absolutely. I'm just curious. Like I'm super curious. And then I think the second thing, which if I've got this right, Luke, your partner has a massive opportunity here. Am I right here?
Oh, yeah.
What's her job?
Oh,
Twofold.
Yeah.
She actually is an
words.
artist and produces some sick art, real world art. But I'm pretty sure she creates digital images for like digital landscape, digital homes, can create like you're saying in game. I'm just thinking, I haven't really played games a lot recently, but if I think of like, say, Call of Duty Online, like you could go and create a skin and then sell it, and then create, and like, you know, whatever it is, sell that. And that's essentially what NFTs are, right? If I've got that right. And then could get a kickback every time someone on sells that.
Yep, absolutely.
Luke, we're on. I mean, well, you're on. I'm on my proxy. I'm on.
Oh, you're on in. Yeah.
I'll invest.
So right now, Ivana will create like a home in Unreal Engine, which is what some games are made of, and it'll be photorealistic. Like some companies that she works for won't realize that it's not a real building that they've just taken photos of. It's like it's
pretty sick.
Photorealistic. It's you know, it's real, but it's not. You can walk through it in virtual reality or whatever, or just on the PC or whatever. And yeah, there's a massive opportunity for that. I think Tom, have you heard of like real estate NFTs? Being able to buy buildings and stuff, like you could buy the Sydney Opera House if you wanted to for however much. And where does it stop? Not that I wanted to, because I love it and I want to keep going down this rabbit hole and learning about it, especially for my own personal use, the stuff that has utility and that has an actual use case that you can use it and then you get some kind of kickback for it, whether it be in the gaming space or something else. Maybe it's like an app on your phone or something. You have like augmented reality as part of it, and you can like sell on these things that you could like yield from the real world somehow, or like you run kilometers and you earn like points for that, and then you can make money off of that somehow or something. Who knows? I want to keep going down this rabbit hole of things. Like, at what point do you think, I'm going to go down a little tangent here, the metaverse has been like something that's kind of like sprung up in the last little while, or at least for me, it has sprung up in the last little while. I'm sure it's been in the pipeline for people forever, for a long time. That's based on Ethereum.
Well, that's a convoluted one as well.
Should I let you just expand on what that is, and then I'll just, because I'm an idiot, I know nothing, so I'll just let the professional talk about it. I think. No,
you're definitely on the right track. So the metaverse itself isn't just one digital landscape or one digital world. There will be probably many different metaverses. The way I like to think of it is similar to, I keep going back to this gaming concept, but it's the one that I feel is the easiest way to kind of explain to people the concept around it. So games themselves could be considered metaverses because they've been built out in a digital setting where, like you've just used, Tom, the example of Call of Duty. Call of Duty itself has a little metaverse world where people obviously go and fight and battle each other within, right? So a metaverse can be built on top of really any existing network. Ethereum's just one of those. You see a lot of people building on other popular networks now, like Solana is also quite popular. The Avalanche network is also quite popular. Think of all these things as, they're referred to as layer one protocols, but they are essentially similar to Ethereum. They differ a lot from Bitcoin. They're very much more similar to Ethereum, where you can go and build stuff on top of them. But I think in terms of the metaverse concept, you'll see, like hundreds, if not thousands of different metaverses being created. And people will either, like the experience they have within inside that particular metaverse, and that will drive adoption to that particular metaverse platform, or people won't enjoy it and people won't go and spend time in that particular metaverse platform itself. It's just kind of a way to, I guess, socialize within inside a digital setting, rather than obviously, socializing in the physical real world.
It's overrated.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what habits this creates, because a lot of this is digital, it's all digital. And so you're going down the gaming path, you're going down metaverse path, and basically an augmented reality. Basically, it's kind of like The Sims, right? You can kind of go in and create your own whatever. be whoever. You've seen like Ready Player One, the games and that sort of stuff. We've been warned about all this. Being that the three of us have been or are currently in the health and fitness space, I just see so many negatives in terms of lifestyle, mental health, physical health, like internal, like all that sort of stuff. And I guess, Facebook's not going to exactly come out and go, hey guys, go outside, get off your phones. But like, being that that's Meta, blah, blah, blah. I'm just kind of blown away that I'm not foolish to think that people don't play games. And that's a whole, realm of the world that I'm not tapped into at all. But I'm a little concerned about where that's all heading for the longevity, not of the human race, that sounds drastic, but like of Western society for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know either. I think things in, like, if you look back on things in history, they tend to go way too far one way to begin with. So people grab an idea and a concept and they run with it as far as they can. And they end up getting to a point where they realize, okay, this is like quite bad. So they sort of bring it back to hopefully a happy medium.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what will happen with this NFT space and also the metaverse space as well. People will realize, okay, like this isn't good to spend 10, 12, 15 hours a day just in this one, metaverse space. This is actually quite bad. I'm, maybe seeing like my mental health decline or certain, key health indicators are starting to decline. And I think people will realize that, okay, this is just a tool like any other tool we've invented throughout human history. And that tool needs to be respected and used in, a responsible setting. So spending that much time on something like, the computer, for example, at this day and age is quite bad. The metaverse is probably going to be the same. You're not going to spend 12, 15 hours a day. Maybe you spend 2 or 3 and you do, similar tasks to what you would maybe do in the real world. But instead of, going to work as an example, you host all your work meetings within the metaverse. Yeah. And you interact with people, in the metaverse that you work with. And maybe you live somewhere really nice, completely like separate from where you actually physically work. And the metaverse just becomes like a vehicle or a tool that you use to interact with people within the same company that you work for, but your actual physical self lives somewhere completely different. Maybe you don't even live in the same city you work in. And the metaverse itself just becomes a tool for you to obviously, host meetings and interact with other people that obviously work for the same company. And maybe you also host meetings with like clients or prospective clients and stuff like that. So I think it'll just be like any other tool we've invented, within human history, and it'll probably be abused in some cases. And then I think people will kind of realize that, okay, like I've just said, this isn't meant to be used 12 to 15 hours a day. Maybe this is meant to be used 2 or 3. Yeah. And then I'm supposed to obviously go and, do some kind of physical activity and actually use my real physical body as well. So.
Yeah, I'm just like, given that both Luke and I are always thinking forward, I'm like, what gap in the market can I see for that eventual lifestyle? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure people are already thinking about it, but like, I'd be so curious to hear what are we didn't think, a subcontracted cryptocurrency advisor would be a role 10 years ago. And it is now. So like going down that path, like cool, in 10 years, what roles will we, like, there was no such thing as a COVID marshal 3 years ago. Like, what kind of things are we going to be anticipating because of this? Because I do believe that, not that I believe that there is a good use for it. I don't know. I'm curious to see how it goes, but I do believe people will adopt it and it will become part of, day-to-day vernacular and lifestyle that people talk about, utilize, all that sort of stuff. What are going to be the new jobs in X amount of time when it becomes the norm? People will go to the gym in the metaverse as opposed to going to the gym in real life and just be like, look at my jacked body. It's like, you could just buy a skin, bro. Like, I don't know, like, it's just going to be so, it's bizarre.
I think in terms of like fitness, maybe you might see things like, how people play like is it called a Wii, Nintendo Wii?
Yeah.
And they do boxing and stuff like that. And it's semi-interactive. You'll probably see stuff like that where you have some form of, augmented reality built on top of like a fitness-based game.
Like a VR thing. Or
yeah.
You have to,
and say you're like running around accomplishing tasks, but you're doing it like with your physical body, but the reality that you've got like an avatar that you're controlling that you can see maybe through some kind of a headset or whatever. I think the ones that will take off are, like companies will adopt this, like I was just saying, for meetings and interacting with staff, and they'll be able to open up an entire, employee pool of people that they could literally employ from other parts of the world rather than, their, current locality. And I think education is probably going to be another one as well. So, traditionally people have gone to universities or private institutions to learn stuff. People are already running lectures inside metaverse gaming environments now that are from, legitimate backgrounds. So there's a couple of people that are running lectures inside a digital metaverse-based lecture hall inside games like, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Sandbox, which is just another crypto-based game, or blockchain-based game, I should say. So I think the technology will probably be used for stuff like that. And then, like you've said, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have heard of like what was a crypto advisor. It wasn't even a job. It's not even wasn't a real thing 10 years ago. So you would just see stuff that we've not even thought about start to crop up in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years time as well.
So let's say hypothetically, this is an augmented reality thing where you can just put your Elon Musk Neuralink in your spine and just like switch on. And I'm really gonna go down. I really want to talk about this jiu-jitsu stuff.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe this is like kind of a segment onto that. Who are you rolling with? You can roll with anyone.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't foresee that being a thing. The reason being, like with jiu-jitsu, right? It's the whole, I guess the whole philosophy of it is like you're actually physically touching people, and I think that like kinesthetic, based
feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Feedback. Thank you. Is really important. You're not gonna you can't really do jiu-jitsu on your own. You can do like movement-based drills and stuff like that, like you sort of can with any sport. But in terms of like actually being able to do jiu-jitsu, you can't do it without a partner. So I don't sort of foresee things like that being a real thing. Maybe you can, interact with, say, a coach who's based in, say, the US, for example, and you guys maybe interact like kind of we are now through like Zoom, and you do like, say, a private, training session with him, but you maybe physically still have somebody else to also train with. So me and another training partner decide to hook up with someone who is a jiu-jitsu coach in the US. We pay him money through, whatever vehicle, maybe Bitcoin, whatever. And we pay him for his time, and maybe he coaches us, through, through some kind of a platform like Zoom or whatever, whatever Zoom ends up evolving into. I'm presuming it's probably going to be more interactive than it already is. So something like that. But I don't foresee, especially jiu-jitsu, like I was saying, like you need it, you need two people to actually be able to do jiu-jitsu. You can't, do it on your own, or I couldn't foresee you doing it in a digital setting. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that answers what your
well, let's say, I'm going to keep going with this. Let's say you and I are about to roll, and we both have a Neuralink, and we can maybe talk about that. I don't know if you know much about what Elon's plans are for that, and I can just like flick mine, and I'm suddenly Gordon Ryan, and I've got the same ability, and I'm strong like him, and my grappling's just like his, and you're Rian McKay, and you can roll against whoever you want if you decide, and it's kind of like this Tekken thing, and we can just like pick our character at the start. That's kind of more what I was going down. Very silly, okay. But who is the training person? Who's like the person that you would ultimately want to roll with?
Yeah, got you. That's an interesting question. Gordon Ryan would be cool. I think it'd be also like really cool to, roll with people who, probably aren't around anymore either. Ilio Gracie would be cool.
Yeah.
Hickson's obviously still around.
Yeah.
Probably considered, one of the greatest of all time, Hickson Gracie. guys like that. I reckon maybe Jigoro Kano as well, who is, you know, the father of judo, which is sort of where, well, not sort of, it is where jiu-jitsu sort of originated. Again, he's obviously not around anymore.
Sure.
So people like that would be really interesting, just to kind of, you know, see what their style of grappling was like, and obviously, you know, feel their pressure and feel how good they are in certain areas and what have you. And obviously get beaten the shit out of by them would be kind of cool as well. So those are the sorts of people I'd probably roll with. I think people that are, you know, around now and in their prime, like we kind of live, not at the moment, obviously we can't really travel with COVID, it's quite difficult, but jiu-jitsu is kind of unique in the fact that it's one of those sports where you can actually go and train with the professionals within the sports. Whereas it's really hard to get access to, say, like going and shooting hoops with LeBron James, or going and kicking a soccer ball with, you know, Ronaldo or something like that. It's pretty much almost impossible. But in jiu-jitsu, you can go and, you know, train with these people and actually be on the same mat as them and roll with them and spar with them and stuff like that. So for me, I would probably be, yeah, more interested in training with somebody who's either deceased or way past their prime, because I can, you know, when hopefully all this COVID stuff's over, I can go and travel and I can go and train with some of the best people in the world. So
Why do you think that is? Is there just like a culture within martial arts or jiu-jitsu especially that allows you to go to their, and sorry for my naivety, but dojo or
academy, we usually say academy. Yeah.
Cool. You can go to their academy and just roll with them. There's like a culture that you can just do that, and not with, you can't just go to the Lakers and like shoot hoops with LeBron.
Yeah. I'm not too sure. I guess you're probably right in terms of, like, it's probably more of a cultural thing. The sport's also like really quite new as well, and it hasn't really taken off to the levels and heights that, you know, these professional sports like basketball and football and baseball and all those sorts of, you know, big sports have kind of taken off through. They have a different system as well. So like any amateur, we say amateur black belt, I use that term loosely. Obviously to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu is quite a hard thing to accomplish. You know, predominantly on average probably takes 10 to 12 years time. So it's a lot of time to commit to something. But any sort of average or hobbyist black belt could go and enter a tournament, the same tournament that maybe Gordon Ryan decides to enter as well, because the leagues themselves that run these tournaments aren't really considered professional. There are professional leagues out there, but they normally are like people who run sort of like fight cards. So similar to maybe the UFC as an example, they're like a private company that holds the rights to, you know, running this UFC type event. We have similar events in jiu-jitsu where they put on like a professional event and the fighters either earn money or they compete for prize money. But predominantly a lot of the events that are taking place that are still considered, you know, the number one events in the world, for example, the IBJJF organization, which runs all the big tournaments, you know, worldwide, internationally, and then predominantly in the US, which is where they hold the actual, we call it the world's competition. So it's the best in the world go and compete once a year in both gi and no gi jiu-jitsu. Competitors from every belt level still have to pay to enter those competitions. If you win at the black belt level, I believe you do earn a little bit of prize money. It's not a lot, maybe $1,000 or something like that, which isn't huge. But I think the sport is still so much in its infancy where like there aren't those big gaps or bridges for people to kind of jump through. So it is like quite easy to get access to, you know, the professionals within the sport. And then I think, yeah, there's a cultural thing as well. Like in any jiu-jitsu academy, on most mats, you'll see black belts training with white belts. And like, obviously the black belt is considered somebody who, you know, has done roughly 10,000 hours of jiu-jitsu. And the white belt is someone who's, you know, very much just beginning their jiu-jitsu journey. They've only just started. So there's like a huge gap in knowledge there. So we don't sort of discriminate against, you know, anybody. People are expected to train with everybody. You're expected to help each other get better and so on and so forth. I think that just comes down to probably the culture, like you've just sort of mentioned earlier, in jiu-jitsu being quite strong. And obviously, you know, it's an individual sport, but it takes a team for you to actually get good. Like we were kind of talking about before with the virtual reality type type jiu-jitsu scenario. Like you can't get good at jiu-jitsu just doing jiu-jitsu on your own. The same sort of thing applies. Like if you're selfish on the mat and you're just training for you, it's pretty hard to get good because you might start beating all the guys in your gym, which is, you know, great. Obviously you're progressing, but for you to actually get really, really good, you want to make the other guys within your gym also level up, you know, hopefully roughly at the same rate you do, so that you've got really, really good, tough training partners to train with. Then you go out and compete against someone. Hopefully the tournament ends up being easier than the training ends up being. So
Sure.
yeah, I think jiu-jitsu is kind of unique in that fact that, you know, it has a pretty unique culture and everyone's like relatively inclusive and what have you on it. Like in most academies, you'll see people from various professional backgrounds. You know, you'll see lawyers, you know, training with, you know, a janitor, for example. You'll see people from various different ethnic backgrounds training with maybe, you know, people, you know, of other ethnic backgrounds that maybe you would never interact with in a different setting to jiu-jitsu. So I think we kind of pride ourselves on the fact that we're, you know, a pretty inclusive community and an environment for people to obviously get knowledge and interact with each other through.
So how did you start getting into jiu-jitsu then? And what was that experience like the first year or 6 months? Lots of sore necks, lots of sore elbows, probably.
Yeah, my body's pretty broken. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for about 10 years this year. How I got into it was, so all throughout high school, in year 8, I was the same height I am now. So for the viewers, I'm 172 centimeters tall. So for year 8, that was pretty tall, but I never grew any more than that. And I ended up being like quite small in stature to a lot of my peers. And I played a lot of team sports, so predominantly football, so Aussie rules football and basketball. And I had a bit of a temper, and I would often get into altercations with people just
so
because
diplomatic.
of my temper.
So diplomatic.
And that would unfortunately lead to, you know, obviously bad outcomes. Some of these altercations were like, you know, they were unnecessary really. And I had a lot of insecurity around about being good at fighting. I wanted to end up, you know, being able to defend myself. You know, obviously kids grow up watching different martial arts movies and stuff like that. And so I just decided when I think it was 16 or 17 when I was first exposed to jiu-jitsu, decided, okay, this is like what I want to do. I was doing karate at the time, which was the only martial art I kind of had around where I was living. And then I moved to Perth. So I grew up in country WA in a town called Manjimup. Like I was saying, that was the only martial art we had was karate roughly. And I moved to Perth when I was 18 or 19. And I'd been friends with a guy who also lived down in that area as well. He lived in Bridgetown, which was about 30 minutes odd drive. And he was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu at the time. And so we ended up training together when I moved to Perth. We sort of both moved to Perth roughly around the same time. And I started training, jiu-jitsu with him. Dabbled for a bit, didn't like it. It was really tough. Obviously, you know, there's not really many other settings you can go and, you know, fight someone 100% and not really get hurt, but you also sort of semi get beat up as well. Like the thing that takes the most beating is your ego. So most people, I think, especially young males, probably think that they're, you know, if they're fit and strong and what have you, they would have this sort of certain idea in their head of their ability to fight and, you know, do well in a fight scenario. And then in jiu-jitsu, like you realize that you're basically helpless against anyone who's maybe done. If you're walking into a jiu-jitsu academy for the first time and you fight someone who's been training jiu-jitsu for 6 months, you're probably going to get submitted 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Not only that, you're not going to be able to do anything at all offensively to the person you're fighting. So you're just getting controlled the whole time. You're basically getting put in, crunched up and put in a washing machine. And you kind of come out of the class going like, oh my God, what the hell just happened? And people usually go 2 routes. They'll either go, okay, I really need to learn this. Like this is really positive. I'm going to put the ego aside. I'm going to go, okay, maybe all these preconceived ideas that I have about myself and fighting, you know, let's just brush that off. I was ignorant. I was naive. I didn't know any better. Now I've found something that's really good and positive for me. I'm just going to go 100% down this route. Or you get people who are like, they want to protect their ego and they want to protect the image that they have of themselves in their own head. and they go, okay, this isn't for me. I'm never going back to doing that, to try and obviously learn that jiu-jitsu stuff. And maybe I got beaten by someone who was really, really good. And of course they were going to win, and they come up with a bunch of excuses and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess so. The first 2 years for me were really tough. I wasn't, I'm not a fast learner. So I learned like at I would say a pretty slow rate to most, like comparative to most people. And I like to just kind of get small pieces of information rather than like big chunks of information at a time, just small pieces of information, and just use those and slowly chip away at learning things. In jiu-jitsu, it's quite hard to do that. Like most of the moves are, at least 4 or 5 steps long, and there's a lot of details within each step that you have to remember. My brain wasn't very good at that. So it took me a while to sort of learn and become semi-proficient at jiu-jitsu. And the first 2 years were pretty tough. I think I fought at white belt maybe 10 or 11 times, and I lost every match up until maybe the last 2 or 3 of my white belt career. And then the same sort of thing happens when you go from white to blue belt. You then become the bottom of the like blue belt pile in the competitive aspect. You start losing again, like a lot. Maybe you've had a bit of success towards the end of white belt. You get graded. For you to go into the blue belt category and do well is quite difficult for most people. You might do okay, but predominantly you're probably going to start losing again. And so that constant cycle of just, competing and losing and rolling and losing was like really good for me personally. I sort of obviously realized like, okay, like, you're not who you've built yourself up to be in your head. That's okay. Like, let's just continue down this path. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be like a lot of positives that come out of it towards the end of it. And so, yeah, I'm 10 years deep in the jiu-jitsu journey. Like you mentioned as well, like body's pretty banged up. Had quite a few surgeries just from jiu-jitsu. Like both knees. I've had both knees done. My left knee twice, right knee once. I've torn rib cartilage multiple times, which is not a fun.
You're really selling it.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, don't do jiu-jitsu. It's really bad. No.
It is one of the more humbling experiences. The first few rolls. I would say I'm a fast learner, and it still probably took me a good 3 months to learn to relax. That's rolling every single day. It's not so much about how hard, and maybe you could correct me, but this is just my experience. It's not so much about how much force you can produce in every little like to and fro, every little like part of the dance. It's not so much about that. It's just about using your force wisely. When you do have an opportunity, you apply pressure fast. You don't have to apply lots and lots of force all the time. And I remember my first few rolls, like the first week or something, I was just like super keen and was loving it, and like rolling with a few mates and getting some guidance from like a couple of coaches and whatnot. And I remember just like pulling up so sore every single day, like my wrists and my forearms and my pecs and my back, and everything was just so sore from just gripping and like pushing and pulling with everything that I had in every interaction. And then after the first maybe 3 months or something, I was like, oh, I can actually learn to breathe in these rolls now. And we could roll for like, initially it was just a couple of minutes at a time. And then it was like, we would have to stop it at 10 minutes, because we were just like kind of in this flow state of like being able to move around each other and not have to apply force all the time, still getting submissions. And we would know if, this guy's got me in a rear naked choke, or like I'm in an armbar here, I'm going to tap pretty early, because we were just rolling for the fun of it. It wasn't a competition or anything like that. We would tap early. Or not super early, but we would tap early enough that we didn't have to get into like an awkward position for our neck or our elbow or, whatever, shoulder, whatever. And I feel like that was the big turning point for me. And that would happen at different points for lots of people. Maybe they just come in straight away and they understand that it's more of like a flow state thing with periods of fast and high intensity and lots of pressure and lots of force. And then other people, it would take years, I'm sure, where they're like, no, the ego is not being, left at the door. And they're just like, every single interaction is as hard as possible. I'm sure the latter is harder to roll with, even if you're very proficient, right?
Yeah, I think people's rolling styles probably, in my opinion, are predominantly made up of what their personality is like. So if you get someone who's, pretty highly strung and they're, like just in their everyday life, they're, you know, quite, what's the word? Like maybe sort of anxious or highly strung is probably a good way to describe them. You're probably gonna roll that person and go, you know, oh, okay, like this guy rolls like 100% intensity 100% of the time for as long as he can. And yeah, obviously, like that's probably not the best way to go about things, at least in my opinion. I'm more of a reserved type person in most settings, I would say. So my personality is like, I was also brought up in the sense that through jiu-jitsu, you have to learn to be efficient. So going 100% is quite difficult to do and maintain over a long period of time. And when you're wrestling someone or rolling someone for, you know, 5 minutes plus, 5 minutes can become like quite a long period of time for you to try and continue to keep rolling at a very like high intense pace. So I was always taught like, okay, you know, being efficient is much better, because if you roll someone who's roughly, you know, going to be 100% intensity, they might have, if they're really good, they might have 2, maybe 3 minutes worth of that high intensity pace before they start getting like really tired and their energy levels drop from say 100% roughly down to, you know, 40 or 50%. And obviously that's bad, because now that like maybe they've chucked all their tools and all their offensive ammo at you, you've maybe weathered the storm for that 2 or 3 minute period. And now they're really tired, but you've just been maintaining say 70 to 75% intensity that whole time, which is much easier to maintain than 100%. And so eventually you're going to come to a point in the role where they're so tired that you can start to implement whatever offense you've been playing or you're trying to play onto your opponent, and obviously control them a lot better as well. It's a lot easier to control someone who's, you know, only got about 40% of their energy levels versus someone who's, you know, 100% energy. So I guess stuff like that, you know, like learning to be efficient is probably really important. And yeah, I think that's probably mostly dictated by, you know, people's personalities and that sort of thing off the mat. I think you can learn a lot about somebody when you roll them, you know, on the mat. Like there's a couple of guys that I train with, they're exactly like you've described. They just go 100% and they're wrecked in 2 minutes. And they've been training for a while, like 2 or 3 years. And you kind of just like, I think to myself, like, okay, like in the beginning, I was like, oh man, this guy's an idiot. Like he's just going to continue to do this, you know, forever. Like surely he's going to learn. And then you learn a bit about them as a person as well. And you kind of go like, oh, well, actually, maybe he is just like this all the time. And that's just how he does stuff. And that's fine. Like he can roll like that. And then you have other people who are much more reserved. Like I was saying, like myself, for example, I'll try and stick to that 70% pace for the whole 5 minute roll versus, you know, trying to obviously maintain 100% intensity. So just, I'm not that fit, so I don't have that in me, but personality wise, it's also quite difficult. Like it's just not in my personality. I don't know what yourself, I don't know how you roll and what have you. Do you go 100% all the time, or what do you sort of do yourself?
Yeah, not now. When I was, it was really early days, and maybe it was because it was the anxiety of like you're in a fight, you know, and I'd never really been in an altercation like that before, you know, outside of footy or whatever. So it was like, okay, I'm fighting for my life here, and if not, then I'm gonna be either like put to sleep or something's gonna hurt real bad. So I have to literally fight for my life, and I think that anxiety around that was what forced me to just go 100%. And I was like, I'm not losing. Like, there's no way that I'm going to allow this person to beat me. But then I quickly realized it's not like that. It's like you're doing lots and lots of little fights that are never super, super intense, you know, you know, in a 10-minute period or whatever, you might roll like 5 to 10 times or 15 times, even if someone gets you in, you know, some kind of like chokehold really, really quickly, or they triangle you really fast or whatever. It's like, okay, tap, release, reset, slap hands, go again. And that might be after 30 seconds, or it could be after 4 minutes. You never really know. So it's, for me, that was the biggest turning point, was realizing that it's not about just this one altercation and it's like win or die. It's kind of like you're playing a few games of chess back to back, literally. It's like physical chess. It's chess with your body is kind of how I like to think about it. And I never really got so proficient that I could think many moves ahead, but I could think maybe 2 moves ahead. I'm like, all right, I put my foot here. That means he's going to do that. And then I'll do that, which means I get this submission or, you know, something along those lines. Yeah, that's how I've learned to roll, is a lot more relaxed. And depending on my mood, it'll either be like I'm pulling guard or I'm like playing top game, or it really depends on like what I'm feeling on the day, I suppose. I'm probably better on top because I haven't got heaps of submissions from the bottom. Maybe triangle. That's probably like the only one. Like a leg triangle or something, or yeah, I don't know. I just feel like kind of going down the fitness route. You said you weren't super fit. I feel like in jiu-jitsu, to do jiu-jitsu, to be good at jiu-jitsu, you just do a lot of jiu-jitsu, right? But then you look at guys like Gordon Ryan, who over like a 12-month period or an 18-month period got jacked and shredded. And suddenly, I don't know if he was the best in the world at the time before he was like huge, like a serious athlete. S&C, as in strength and conditioning, must come into it at some point. Is that something that you have an emphasis on in your academy?
Yes, usually from a personal perspective, right? So with jiu-jitsu and predominantly with like a jiu-jitsu academy, you'll have like people from all walks of life. So you'll just have, you know, the 1 or 2 day a week hobbyist who just comes in. They like to jiu-jitsu probably for predominant reason would probably be some kind of like social aspect. They obviously enjoy doing jiu-jitsu as well. Like they enjoy getting a bit of a sweat on. They enjoy doing some kind of fitness. They enjoy interacting with people and what have you. S&C sort of side of it comes into when you're, you know, talking about someone who maybe wants to compete on a regular basis. You have to sort of obviously be in shape, right? Like you can't go into a jiu-jitsu competition, which is another level of intensity up from just rolling in the academy. You can't go into a competition expecting to do well if you're not very fit. Like I was saying, if you roll 100% for 2 minutes, you're going to be wrecked. And in a competition setting, depending on the format, you might have 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10 matches in a day. So if you're fit and you're wrecked after 2 minutes, so if you're unfit and you're wrecked after 2 minutes of just one roll, and you have that many matches in one tournament, you're going to have like a pretty bad day. So yeah, S&C comes into it when you want to start taking the emphasis away from like a hobbyist sort of perspective. Like I was saying, maybe you train like 1, 2, 3 times a week. You don't really want to compete. If you start to move down the competition route, yeah, strength and conditioning is encouraged. We don't do a specific strength and conditioning class ourselves. But like, Gordon Ryan and stuff like that, I think jiu-jitsu fitness is actually quite hard to replicate outside of a jiu-jitsu setting. So to get better at jiu-jitsu and to get more efficient at jiu-jitsu, the answer is probably going to be, roll and do jiu-jitsu as much as you can. There's also other benefits to, weight training and stuff like that. So for example, Gordon Ryan was like super skinny towards the end of his brown belt and early black belt career. And then obviously he got like quite big and shredded. And obviously, yeah, turned into just a monster, arguably one of the best no-gi grapplers in the world. I think weight training, just generalized like physical preparedness, probably being through that weight training route is really kind of important. More so from a fact that like you're putting your body in bad positions all the time through jiu-jitsu, and you want to have some kind of defense mechanism against injury. I think that's probably going to be the main one. Obviously being fit and strong helps as well. Although jiu-jitsu is predominantly built on like a foundation of technique, overcoming strength. When two people have the equal ability of technique, usually the fitter, faster, stronger person out of those two people are probably going to win, right? So kind of gives you a small advantage in that fact also. But I think injury prevention is probably, at least from a personal perspective, so from my personal perspective, is the main reason I would obviously do some kind of strength and conditioning program. And then I also just enjoy like doing fitness as well outside of jiu-jitsu. Like it's good to just, lift weights and go and throw some heavy stuff around, or although not so heavy because I'm not very strong, but
relative.
So, yeah. So stuff like that. So to answer your question, yeah, I think strength and conditioning is really important, but it depends on the individual's goals and what they're looking to get out of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess we're kind of comparing, like if you were to compare me to Gordon Ryan, that dude literally doesn't take a day off. His coach's name escapes me.
John Danaher.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's an interesting dude from what I've seen with his interviews with Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan, and he wears his rash guard everywhere. And he's an interesting dude. It's cool that he's from like down this way, actually, Oceania. Is he Kiwi? I think.
Yeah, he's from New Zealand.
Yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
and he's like arguably the best coach ever, and just like has this obsession with all MMA, kickboxing as well, I believe, or some striking art. But jiu-jitsu just seems like his thing now, and they don't take days off. And I guess we're comparing someone that has that kind of mentality in Gordon Ryan, like one of his top students, and then adding S&C on top of that. It's like, all right, that's going to get you your extra 5% on top of the competition, versus someone that comes and rolls like maybe 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week. That extra S&C session is maybe it's not going to inhibit you, but you could easily put those hours into jiu-jitsu and just get better at jiu-jitsu faster. So I guess it's like, we're not really comparing apples and apples, I guess, in that sense. So that makes a lot of sense, actually. Is you would rather, if you just want to get good at jiu-jitsu, just do lots of jiu-jitsu until you're never taking any days off, not even Christmas or anything. And then you can maybe add in on some S&C. But for injury prevention, actually, this is like it's something that we talked about just in our last episode, where, because I run a couple of football teams through their S&C stuff, preseason, in season, and generally it's just like, as you say, it's general physical preparedness. Like, it's just going to help prevent injuries. If you're more rigid and more robust, and you're stiff in the right areas and you're mobile in the right areas, then you're just going to, have a better time playing sport, whatever that is, whether that's jiu-jitsu or whether that's AFL or whatever. If you're stronger, you're going to be able to have, more tensile strength and denser muscles, and you're going to be able to maybe withstand some of the pressures of people and not get injured as fast. So that's just like a testament to what you're saying as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like going back to that comparison with Gordon Ryan as well. Like, those guys train just, they're professionals. They're trying to take the sport to another level, and obviously their ability to do that relies heavily on them being able to accumulate that training volume. So they're training, like you've just said, 7 days a week, 365 days a year most of the time, except for obviously when they get injured, although even then they're still working around those injuries. They have the time to do that, and obviously they have the drive and mental drive to do that as well. One thing that's probably not talked about a lot in jiu-jitsu is at the professional level, like, not only are these guys extremely driven and like obsessed to the point of where they're obsessed with jiu-jitsu, like doing jiu-jitsu for 3-4 hours a day, sometimes longer. I think performance enhancing substances are also widely dabbled in. You go and look at a bunch of these guys competing at the highest level. So the competition that we sort of look at for no-gi grappling is ADCC, and you look at a bunch of the guys that are competing in there, they look like they could be amateur bodybuilders, right? And like, you don't get that through just through lifting weights and just through doing jiu-jitsu. Like, there's a lot of guys that are
Lots of spinach. That's it.
Yeah, lots. We say asahi. Asahi's are quite a popular dessert in Brazil, but we say, yeah, they're obviously on the asahi. They're eating a lot of asahi bowls, so that also plays a factor too.
It's not regulated then?
No, so a lot of the organizations that do professional jiu-jitsu tournaments don't test at all. Like I was saying, it's not big enough. It's not popular enough and big enough for them to spend the money to go and do that.
Yeah.
And to be fair as well, to critique that side of things, like, you kind of want to see the best guys competing against each other. And I personally don't care if you go and, dabble in the dark arts, so to speak. Like, I want to see the best guys competing against each other. And if that's what it takes to get there, then that's fine. Like, I personally, I don't see anything wrong with it. Although there is like obviously a moral, thing. Like, I've never done performance enhancers as an example, just from a personal perspective. Like, I don't know enough about it, and I'm not disciplined enough to go and, start doing stuff like that. But just from a moral perspective, like, it could kind of be considered cheating. But I mean, if they're not going to test, and the people want to see the best guys competing as well, like, go and do what you like, as long as there's an even playing field. Like, you're competing against other people that are doing the same thing. So
yeah, as long as it's even.
Yeah, as long as it's even. And if it's not tested, and it's known that it's not tested, and it's like, cool, do what you need to do to be the best. Like, not saying I'm all for it, but like, it makes it a level playing field.
Exactly.
The best argument for performance enhancing drugs is just to let everyone have them. and then you're going to see the most elite athletes. Like otherwise, yeah, it is regulated, and then it is, there's whole research departments in Russia that, look into how can I get around a rule, basically. So if there's no rules, obviously, I think that with grappling, it's slightly different, I guess. But, when it comes to any sort of impact-based sport, there's life at risk when it comes to, like, I'm thinking NFL, boxing, all those sorts of stuff, and it is regulated. That's when it's like, cool, well, if you do all that, you actually have a greater, and the other person doesn't, potentially, there's a greater risk for death or, long-term injury, which I don't agree with, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you feel the big difference is between someone that is at that elite level, like your Gordon Ryans and your John Danaher?
John Danaher, yeah.
John Danaher. Is it just an obsession, or is there something else? Like, what is the most important thing, do you think, that
Drugs.
Okay, besides performance enhancing drugs,
Yeah.
besides, is it obsession? What makes them so elite? Like someone that is striving to be the best in the world at something, is there like a special personality trait that they've got, or what is it in your opinion?
I don't know if there's one specific thing you could pinpoint. I think there's probably like a basket of things that these individual people have within inside themselves that would contribute to them obviously going on and being the best in the world at something. I think for jiu-jitsu, two main things sort of kind of come up, and a guy named John Will, who is quite a well-known figure here in the Australian jiu-jitsu community. He was one of the first 12 non-Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts in the world. He lives in Melbourne. He talks about this quite a lot, and he talks about being a really, really good student. So someone who is diligent with their training, but they also listen to their coach. They take notes. They do every single tiny little, minute thing that could be considered like most people wouldn't even consider doing. They do that to 100% of their best ability, and they become an elite level student. And I think when that elite level student marries up with an elite level coach, so on the other side of the thing where that coach themselves has an extremely deep knowledge base of obviously their area of expertise. So in John Danaher's case, it's jiu-jitsu. And then when those two sort of parties come together, you kind of see like pretty freakish things happen. Like, for example, Gordon Ryan himself becoming, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu athletes of all time. So I think it's probably like a basket of things, but you have to be like a really elite level student married up with an elite level jiu-jitsu coach to kind of take you to that sort of level. You can also get really good, like if you have a Gordon Ryan personality, for example, like where you are an elite level student, maybe you just have an average coach, you can still get like to a world-class level, really good. But you, as a student, I guess you probably have to do more work because the resource you're learning from, maybe isn't as or doesn't have as deep a knowledge base as obviously a John Danaher or like a John Will or someone like that. So
I think that's perfect answer to any question about how you get better at something. Like, you need to be willing to do, like, or you think of anyone that's got to the 1% of the 1%, like, you need to be willing to be humbled and learn from, like, just learn and do everything spot on, and then do the groundwork, do your 10,000 hours, all that sort of stuff. But then if you're learning from a shit resource, like, you're going to be barreling down a pretty long path to nowhere, or to not being amazing. Like you say, like, even with the crypto space, going back to that, like, if you're not learning from the right resources, you could end up in some pretty deep shit. But if you're doing all the right things and learning from the right resource, you're going to be successful. And I think that might be a really good spot to maybe wrap this up, because unknowns to me, this has actually carried on quite a while, bordering on 2 hours here.
Nice.
Ryan, I just think that you've given up so much of your time, so I do appreciate it, and so much of your knowledge. And I definitely feel like this isn't the last time we get you on to pick your brain. There's probably a lot more in both spaces to barrel down and learn about. Two questions maybe that you might be able to help with to wrap up is, where would you suggest? You obviously suggested a couple of places for people to start to learn about crypto. If people did want to invest and don't have that $500 upfront that ComSec still asks for, where would you kind of point them?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, education is key. So, trying to get, like you've kind of just said, trying to learn from good resources. Like I said, I really enjoy consuming content from Rao Powell, who runs the Real Vision Finance platform, or education space. In terms of like, are you asking where would I put my money if I was completely new to crypto, or are you asking where
kind
I
of, and how to get into it? Like, like I know that, there's various different online platforms like a ComSec. How would you go and buy crypto? And maybe if you do have financial advice, or where would you look to start?
I wouldn't give any, I won't give any financial advice, but I would start with something really basic. So like I started with a platform called CoinJar. It's just like a really simple crypto-based wallet that you can download on your app. That's quite a good sort of place for most people to start. But there's like multiple different wallets you can download. CoinJar is just one of them. CoinSpot's another good one. Those two are both Australian-based. A method I really like to use or advocate use of is the dollar cost averaging method. So there's platforms out there that are very similar to Raise. I don't know if you guys have heard of the Raise investment platform, but basically Raise came along and you would just invest, you would round up your everyday purchases. Say, for example, you bought a coffee for $4.95. The 5-cent difference would be rounded up. So you would actually spend $5. And that 5-cent difference was invested through the Raise app. And the Raise app would then go and invest in a bunch of different, usually shares. So they would go and invest in, like tech stocks or environment stocks or whatever your portfolio is weighted towards. There's another app out there called Bamboo, which does the exact same thing for crypto. So it goes and invests that little roundup, 5-cent piece into Bitcoin, Ethereum, gold, and silver are the four sort of investment vehicles it uses. And that's quite a simple way to just get your foot in the door in the crypto space. And then I think once you've got your foot in the door, you kind of spark a bit of a flame and go down like an education route. So a lot of people go down the route of, okay, like I'm going to try and make as much money as I possibly can in a really short period of time. And for 99% of people, I think that's the wrong way to go about things. I think people get burnt quite easily because they jump and see like people doing a bunch of different things around the crypto space. They think that they can just replicate the same results those people are having, but it's really difficult to make money quite fast. Like I was saying before, I personally, in the investment fund that I work for, has a big sort of macro, outlook on the crypto space. So we invest now thinking that maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the track, Bitcoin and Ethereum and obviously some of the other investments we've made within the crypto space are going to be worth much, much more than what they currently are now. So I think also having like a macro sort of level, long-term or mid to long-term investment thesis is also quite important.
Yeah, cool. And obviously you mentioned dollar cost averaging, and that's essentially just drip feeding a consistent quantity or amount that you go, cool, every pay I'm going to just allocate X amount, whatever the price. You're not really worried about that because you are about that long-term play.
Yeah, exactly. The book that really made that hit home for me was The Richest Man in Babylon, which is not a crypto book at all. Obviously it's been around for a long time, but the main pardon me, the main takeaway I had from that book was invest 1/10 of everything you own, into something. So you pay yourself before you pay anybody else, and 1/10 of your paycheck goes towards paying yourself. And then you use that money however you want. So you could go and stick it in a savings account, although you're probably not going to earn much. And in fact, you're probably going to have, the buying power of that money that you save is probably going to be less in 5 years' time, like we talked about with inflation and stuff.
Yeah.
So I personally would just invest, or I personally do invest out of my own personal money. Not
financial advice.
Not financial advice. But I personally invest 1/10 of every paycheck into like a dollar cost averaging method. So I would go and buy, some form of cryptocurrency with 1/10 of my paycheck every time I get paid.
Yeah, sick. And then like say, you're 10 years down the route of BJJ, sort of same question. What would you say to someone that's, full of ego or looking to kind of get into martial arts? Any of the martial arts, I guess. I feel like some of them or a lot of them would have a similar ethos, not the same. But what would you suggest or recommend for those that are listening going, yeah, I've heard about this BJJ. How do I go about it?
Yeah, just I mean, obviously you want to try and search for an academy that's probably pretty close to where you're based. And then I would recommend people spend time, like obviously a lot of academies and a lot of fitness institutions have like free trials and stuff like that, or like short-term obligation-based memberships where you can go and trial out their facility. Not every jiu-jitsu facility is what's the word, like not every individual that walks into one jiu-jitsu facility, that facility might not be the right space for that particular individual to learn from or to train in. So I think spending time like traveling around and maybe, you know, dabbling in 2 or 3 different academies that are hopefully somewhere within your area, and then finding the right one that fits you, so the one that you enjoy, you know, the most, and obviously sticking with it. And that's obviously the biggest thing as well, I think, is just like sticking with it. It's going to take, you know, the first 6 months are probably going to be pretty tough. You're probably not going to have much success. Like, you're going to be getting submitted a lot more times than doing any kind of submissions to your partners. But those skills are, you know, invaluable. And I think looking back, you know, after doing jiu-jitsu for a decade, like the lessons you learn on the mats also sort of semi-translate off the mats as well. I think those things are quite powerful. And, you know, just learning like basic self-defense stuff, I think is, you know, pretty important nowadays as well. So I would just say, if anyone who's walking into a jiu-jitsu academy for the first time, stick it out for at least 6 months, see how you go. Hopefully, obviously you have some successes that kind of keep you coming back to the academy, and then just enjoy your time training, right? Like, you're going to have days that are terrible and you're getting beaten up, and, you know, people that you should be able to beat are beating you and what have you. And then you're also going to have days where you feel like Gordon Ryan, as an example, and you feel like the best guy in the world, and you know, untouchable in your academy. So you're going to have ups and downs all the time. Just stick with it over that period of time, and you'll sort of see the benefits, hopefully, of doing jiu-jitsu.
Awesome, man. That's great advice. Thanks for coming on today, Ryan. Appreciate it a lot, man.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Awesome to jump on the podcast. Appreciate you guys having me on. So thank you.
Anytime, man.
Not a problem. Chat soon, man.
Take care. Ciao.